Now, it's no secret that a lot of people around Asia don't like Japan. Think Chinese and Koreans as the most obvious examples. And given the recent history between these nations, it's quite understandable. Taiwan, however, is different. Arriving in Taiwan for the first time, you could easily be forgiven for thinking you had gotten on the wrong plane and gotten off in Japan, as there are so many Japanese things around. Restaurants, department stores, big Japanese brands, a plethora of stores selling Japanese stuff, renovated Japanese buildings. The list is endless. Now, I know what you're thinking. Doesn't Taiwan have a similar history to Korea and some parts of China in that it was occupied and then ruled, often brutally, for several decades by the Japanese? Correct. Except here, it's safe to say that unlike their neighbours, the majority of Taiwanese, and I stress it's not everybody, view their former colonial ruler in a mostly positive light. And I'm not just talking about cosplayers and teenage girls with their kawaii Hello Kitty obsessions. This positive attitude even extends to older Taiwanese, people you assume would have more reason to dislike the Japanese than their younger compatriots who were born post-war. Why is that? Well, it's largely down to pragmatism and the fact that by the end of World War II, when the Japanese were forced to relinquish their 50-year hold on the island, Taiwan was the most advanced place in Asia, outside of Japan itself. Endemic diseases had been eradicated, infrastructure had been built, and a thriving modern economy had developed. And consequently, those who lived through that period remember and appreciate those advances. And such advances were down to the hard work, determination, and generosity of people like this guy, Japanese engineer Yoichi Hatta. Born in 1886 in Ishikawa Prefecture, Hatta arrived here in Taiwan in 1910, fresh out of college, and found employment in the Civil Engineering Division of the Taiwan Governor General's Office, working as a water engineer here in Tainan. After cutting his teeth on the Taoyuan Irrigation Canal project, the impressive Hatta was tasked with solving the irrigation problems of the Jianan Plain, a huge swathe of flat land that stretches almost 100 kilometers southwards from Jiayi down to Kaohsiung. With rice riots occurring back in the motherland, Japan needed to increase its rice production, and so this massive stretch of largely barren colonial land was deemed a prime spot. This wasn't a simple task though, as the plain's lack of a reliable water source, frequent flooding, and high salinity in coastal areas meant that it was largely cultivated with dry field crops, such as sweet potato and peanuts. Hatta's solution was revolutionary and resulted in the construction of 16,000 kilometers of irrigation and drainage channels, plus the largest reservoir in Asia at the time, the 66-meter-high Ushantou Dam. Work began on the project in 1920, and it was finally finished 10 years later with the completion of the dam, bringing enough water to irrigate a third of the 150,000-hectare plain. Hatta's dedication to the task and his kind treatment of the local people throughout the duration of the project, he built schools, hospitals and leisure facilities for those working on the dam, endeared him to the Taiwanese, as well as the farmers who benefited from the scheme's completion. Not content with just putting the infrastructure in place, Hatta also ensured that the newfound wealth-generating potential of the Jianan Plain was equally distributed amongst its residents by implementing an annual crop rotation system that ensured all the farmers had an equal opportunity to grow more valuable rice crops. The irrigation scheme was a roaring success, increasing production in the region fourfold in just 4 years, and coupled with his unassuming yet generous character, resulted in Hatta achieving almost godlike status in southern Taiwan, with grateful co-workers and subordinates eventually erecting this statue of him in 1931, a year after the scheme's completion. Such achievements meant that Hatta's services were in big demand, But it was this newfound fame that eventually led to his death, as Hatta was killed in May 1942 en route to the Philippines to inspect some irrigation works, after the ship he was travelling on was sunk by the American Navy. His body was cremated before being returned to Taiwan and buried by his statue. 3 years later, and tragedy struck once more, as following the end of World War II, rather than return to Japan, Hatta's wife Toyoki committed suicide, jumping into the spillway of the reservoir her husband had built during a typhoon, so that she could be laid to rest alongside him. The duo interred for eternity in the place they had dedicated so much of their lives to. The end of the story? Not quite. Remember, I mentioned earlier that not everyone here in Taiwan is so fond of the island's Japanese legacy. Well, the story of Hatta's statue demonstrates this fact perfectly. Following its erection in 1931, the effigy disappeared toward the end of the Second World War, hidden by locals who feared it would be melted down, especially as anti-Japanese sentiment was running high at the time, following the defeated Chinese nationalists' retreat to the island. It remained hidden away for decades until 1981, when it was eventually deemed safe to restore the statue to its original location. But even then, there was another twist, as in April 2017, the likeness was vandalised, its head cut off by a pro-China politician, who admitted doing so, saying it was in revenge for similar attacks on statues of the former ROC president Chiang Kai-shek. The statue, however, was repaired and reinstated within weeks, just in time for that year's annual Hatta Memorial Service. And it's still here today, standing proudly next to Hatta's defining work, and serving as a permanent reminder of how Taiwanese people will respect and admire those who contribute to their society, no matter where they come from. Okay guys, that is it for today's history lesson. Hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. If you did, don't forget to give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and you can always click the bell for notifications to catch my videos every Saturday morning. I promise every Saturday won't be a history lesson. If you'd like to help support the channel, then you can click thanks down below, or as usual, head on over to my Buy Me a Coffee page, see what's on offer there. Remember, 3 coffees or more for the chance of a Hikelopedia embroidered patch. Long trip home now, and it's very, very hot, so I'm just aiming for a bit of sympathy. Anyway, take it easy, and I'll see you next week. Over and out.